between for social engineering. So I'm gonna warn you now. I'm working from home like most of you, and it's Sunday, so I'm home with my family. So you may hear, like a lot of you have kids, you may hear my 8 months old. I was literally running up here after feeding him, and I have a 10-year-old. So this is the reality for a lot of you, and you know this is how it is. But what hopefully you all realize is that when it comes to where the money's at, where the target's at, where we're seeing a lot of the threat activity, it's all about following the money. There is a famous criminal in the early 1900s that robbed trains, and he would do that. He would get arrested, and then break out and do it again. And one time he was interviewed asking, well, why do you keep robbing banks and trains? And the answer was simple: it's where the money's at. So if you think about it, this is where the money's at. And this is where you may say, oh, social engineering, I've heard this topic before. Well, I mean, it's the same thing as email security. I mean, you've heard about email security. Email is still one of the top threats that we're seeing today. The difference, though, I would say, is the email threats versus social engineering. First off, email threats could be part of a social engineering attack. And second, the tactics used for social engineering are really, really open-ended, because the medium is any form of communication, and the tactics and targets could be anybody. But right now, I assure you, all of us being at home right now, that's where the money is at. We are the targets. So what I'll do today is go through, like I said, different types of social engineering attacks using free open source tools, talk about defense strategies, etc. If you're wondering who I am and why listen to me on this topic, I do work for Cisco. I'm an architect at Cisco, but I also do a bunch of research stuff as well. You can follow me here and there. I'm going to be speaking next week, I believe, for Cisco or for RSA, and then for Cisco Live the following month. I do a lot of publications, and I got a couple books coming out. I got one on Security Operations Center and one for the CCNP. And basically, I'm a soccer player, so that's who I am. The reality of it is, I actually don't look like that right now. I kind of look like this because we're all working from home, and every time we go out, this is the reality of it. This is the current state of where I'm at. I actually just took that picture 5 minutes ago. All right, so first off, when it comes to attack and defend, a lot of people do not truly understand the threat. So I'm going to make it really simple for you by showing you the tools and some free open source stuff that you can use to basically stress this idea of this threat. Now, to understand threat in general, understand that it's an attack and defend cat and mouse game. So regardless of what strategy you think I'm going to talk about, that strategy is constantly changing, and it's constantly being adjusted. It's constantly understanding your tools and figuring out ways around your tools. So even like ransomware that's been around since the 90s, which most people don't know that. They think it's been around since 2015. Ransomware has been around for the 90s as an example. Ransomware had to make a bunch of adjustments before it became effective. Ransomware initially asked you to pay via like a Western Union or something that you can track. There was no Bitcoin at the time when it first came out. Its form of exploitation was kind of following general forms. There wasn't like exploit kits and these massive ways to push it. So the right elements weren't there for it to be effective. But around the 2015 time, when some of the first major ransomware exploits started hitting the world, those were because the right elements existed. You had Bitcoins, you had Tor networks to hide the asymmetric encryption. You had exploit kits to make it easy to infect and massively infect systems. And that's really, even with social engineering, these attacks follow themes. It's very theme oriented. So when you say, well, what's social engineering? It's really, what is the theme of the month or the story being told, and a way to abuse that story in order to accomplish a goal. And that story is constantly changing. And that's more of what's interesting. Not like, hey, how do I use this tool to launch an attack? But it's more about what is the current story and how is that story, basically, how effective is that story? That's the way you got to think about when it comes to learning and understanding and knowing thyself and thy enemy for social engineering, is what's that story? Now, there's two forms. There's the smash and grab, as we call it in the industry, or the I'm just going to blast the world with stuff and hope that a small percentage gets hit. And when that happens, then you make money. And then there's targeted. For this smash and grab type stuff, the good news for a lot of people is that the reputation based security of the world has really reduced the effectiveness of this approach. So, for example, on the left, that's Gmail using reputation security. And when I say reputation security, you're looking at the reputation of the source and seeing if it's potentially malicious. And a lot of times now, like email providers, even free ones, will tell you, hey, this is probably spam or phishing. So the blast type stuff doesn't necessarily have that effectiveness. So what's interesting is a lot of the blast stuff has been coming over the phone. If you're in the USA, around the last IRS, I would say tax time, and the time before that, there was a huge amount of phone scams. I got hit probably 3 times with the phone call where you had the robotic voice saying, "Hey, you didn't pay your taxes, and you owe X amount of dollars. You're going to have to go to court, or you can wire this money right now and pay your dues." Now, for some of you, may say that's a ridiculous scam, but if you imagine the target audience, let's say it's elderly people, which I'm not that person, but one day I will be, they may say, oh crap, I don't want to have to go to court, especially right now with the coronavirus. Like, oh, I don't want to have to go through the effort of going to court. That's nuts. But apparently it's working because that scam has been repeated in various iterations for the last few years. Another example of this scam will be something like the traditional emails where they say they have some information and they'll make it really open-ended and try to apply it to you. So any of that kind of stuff is the smash and grab stuff. But what's more interesting, and the one that I'll kind of focus more on, is the targeting attacks. This is where we get into like some of the talks I'll reference later, where I've done penetration testing using just social media to compromise customers for paid engagements, just using like Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And the tactic that's typically being used is just reading what's public and using that against you. So it's not like anything that I'm really gathering secret information. It's just I'm pretending to know you, twisting the language around, and most people just are not effective at this. And as I mentioned, it's happening a lot right now. If you look at everybody's at home and where the targets are at, there's tons. I would say the 2 top things right now we're seeing is either phishing social engineering scams or fake software with backdoors. And I'll show you how to do both. But in either case, it's a form of social engineering. It's trying to trick you to do something, whether it's install something or give out some information. But we're seeing tons of it. And a lot of it right now, the theme is COVID-19, because people want to know information around COVID-19. So they wrap their attacks around that. One example, and this is simple to make this at home and easy, just use Metasploit, and or in this case, I'm using the social engineering toolkit, the set tool, and basically just clone a website. So I pick any website, like in this case, a Gmail. I want to get your Gmail login. Within a minute, I can basically clone a Gmail site, and then it's not really the tools, as I mentioned, it's a story. All I need to do is come up with some story to get you to log in the site, and that's it. I won. I'll have your login. This is why you should have multi-factor authentication in all of your sources, including your free sources. So if you've not turned on multi-factor on your Gmail, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, etc., all those sources offer the ability to say, hey, you have to also receive an email and then put in a password that we're going to send you via email. So it's something that you have and something that you know. I'll talk about blue team stuff in a little bit, but basically, hopefully you've enabled this. But it's stupid easy to do this, and it's still effective today because most people don't realize. I mean, this is a really rudimentary example where I'm not even like hiding the location, but you can hide the location and just basically trick somebody to log in. The other rudimentary attack, and I'm going to go deeper in this, but the start rudimentary is the idea of wrapping malware. So Sienna Spiral 1 is an example of a free tool you can use to wrap anything. So I can, for example, go to Metasploit, create a backdoor, and wrap it in a COVID-19 health map, or this example, a calculator, or a music file. or a PDF. And this has actually been used. This became a big thing back in the Napster days when people were sharing free software. And you would wonder, like, who the hell is sharing this free stuff on Napster? Why are they doing this? What's the benefit? Is it always like people just sharing stuff? And the answer is no, it's not actually. A lot of times people are wrapping backdoors. Now, the argument to this would be, well, won't my antivirus or other people catch this? And that's where there's topics like encoding and polymorphism, and most malware is packed. So if this is an executable we're wrapping, we'll wrap the executable and then pack it with a packer, like, I mean, some commercial BS one like UPX, or some customized packer, and you start to do that, and now your antivirus and your threat detection tools are likely not going to detect it. Now I just got to get you to install it, and that's the social engineering aspect. I create a story, I wrap this, and then from there, you believe the story, you install it, and I win. Now, if you're saying, well, what happens if a pop-up or something happens? Well, the attackers are testing all that. And it's not as simple, by the way, as, oh, I just go wrap this, go to VirusTotal, see if VirusTotal sees it or not, and then I'm good. It's a lot more sophisticated than that. Like, that's amateur penetration testing. So to give you an example of this, now this is illegal. So this is Magic Land. So we're gonna pretend like we're in Magic Land, and let's say hypothetically, somebody's gonna try to social engineer attack me, and I'm gonna attack back in Magic Land. So this story is, somebody calls me and says, hey, I'm Dell Security. Now, I don't use Windows, I use a Mac. I mean, not hating on Windows, but it's what I do. And they basically were telling me that my computers are infected and that they offer a service to basically fix everything. So I was like, excellent, send me your documentation. So they said, yeah, we have documentation. I thought the documentation would be wrapped with backdoors, but it wasn't. So I was like, interesting. Why don't I wrap their documentation with backdoors and send it back to them? So basically, in this scenario here, just to give you again an example of how attackers do this, in Magic Land, this is creating a payload or a backdoor, like a meta interpreter, that I'm going to put inside this Word document that was sent to me from this person trying to social engineer me. Now, I'm showing this so you can visualize this. You typically hide this, but this is before I'm hiding it. Again, I'm kind of doing this from a visual perspective of pasting this so you can actually see this. But again, you wouldn't have this code revealed that I'm showing here at the bottom. I'm just showing it to you now so you can see what it looks like when it's not hidden. But basically, you have this other code, or basically backdoor code, that will execute when you run this document. So it's as simple as wrapping a backdoor into a document. Now, I was stupid at this point, but actually more excited. And I sent the document, but didn't necessarily fill out the document. So I should have also actually put information in there, but I didn't do that because I was too excited, and kind of waited. And eventually the attacker in Magic Land opened the document and allowed me to get a backdoor in Magic Land on this attacker's computer. At that point, then I'm able to start to interact with this attacker, which is fun, such as, and I'm fat fingering things, sorry, it's excitement type stuff, but basically was able to run and get access to the desktop. So at this point, the guy is telling me, hey, you didn't fill anything out, but at least it doesn't matter to me. So I'm telling them, all right, sorry, I sent you the wrong one, but while I'm doing that, I start to basically mess with his computer. Now, the person that did the research with me works at Fortinet, and we're not allowed, apparently, because of the cross companies to show, but here we turn on the camera, and I have to stop the video, but at that point, we turn on the camera, and we can see the data center, and yeah. So in Magic Land, that's hacking back using the exact same tactics that they use against you. I don't recommend to do that in that case. In Magic Land, if we were to destroy those computers, all they're going to do is realize that people can hack back. They had multiple people doing this attack. They have multiple computers. So all we're doing is teaching them to be more secure. It's not like they're going to stop because in Magic Land we destroyed a couple of their computers. That doesn't really do anything. So in the end, you're best to protect yourself. Don't be the Batman of the internet and try to attack back. You won't really accomplish any goals. Also, I've had people ask the question, well, what if you found victim passwords? This isn't a capture the flag scenario where, in Magic Land, I break this guy's box, and then there's a Word document on his desktop that says victim's passwords, and you download that Word document and start calling people. It doesn't work that way. And then again, hacking back is probably illegal where you're at. So that's an example of using the same tools that anybody else is using, the two I showed, which you probably heard of, but again, it's all about storytelling. My buddy did a similar attack where he wrapped Cisco WebEx. So the same thing, but the attacker was like, hey, I can, enter these commands. He was unpurposely fat fingering the commands and then said, you know what? Why don't I give you access to my desktop? I have this cool tool called WebEx, and it could be Zoom, it could be any video conferencing. Why don't I give you this, and then I'll give you the keyboard access. In this case, it was WebEx, and then using the same wrapper tool, wrap the back door, and then the person would have access to his sandbox. So he gave him access to a fake computer, and while the person was doing that, he had his computer up and was basically going through the person's real computer using the back door that was planted through WebEx. So again, these tactics, the technology's been around for a while. It's more about the understanding the storytelling and understanding how to use social engineering. That is what actually keeps changing, and that is what you need to be worried about. Because I assure you, as smart and as prepared you are, all you need is the right story hitting the right nerve, and you too will likely be susceptible to this. I mean, it's human nature we're attacking. It's humans naturally want to trust, and that's the hard part for the defense. With that being said, let's go into the defense and what are things that you can do. If you're thinking perimeter security is not going to help you. Perimeter security is good for the general defense. Perimeter security is antivirus. It's firewalls. It's stuff that stops an exploit from happening. So it's all about like hypersensitive to blocking vulnerabilities. Perimeter security is not breach detection. So to give you an example, a honeypot is not perimeter security. A firewall is, but if a firewall fails, the honeypot is designed to validate that the firewall is doing its job. And if the firewall fails, then you have another layer of defense. That's breach defense. So we've seen forever now that the tactics are there. And a lot of times it's social engineering, basically having you allow the perimeter gate to go down. So again, you got to be thinking more breach defense. This basically applies to your corporate network and your home network. So when people say, well, we're all working from home, how do I secure my home network? I really haven't thought about my home network. These are the three things that I've been telling people to do to prevent this type of attack, which is, and I'll go through the three here quickly, but it's the people, process, and technology. And people, process, technology has always been a best practice. This also applies to home networks, as well as corporate networks, as well as defending against social engineering. It's not about buying a tool, and it's not about education, and it's not about just saying, oh, well, we're going to automatically stop bad stuff. It's the combination of things. So to be clear, phishing defenses, these are the things that you should be thinking about. First off, reputation security. If you've never heard of reputation security, I'm going to give a demo of the concept. But really what we're talking about is credit scoring sites. If you don't know what I mean, see that website right there? I have a bad reputation.com. That website is a good test site. Actually, you know what? I'll demo this. Why not? So I'll go here. I'll pull up a website and I'll go to ihaveabadreputation.com. Now, most people who are doing social engineering attacks are going to have a source they're attacking from. They're likely going to buy a source. They're going to stand up something. It's only going to be online for a couple of hours. If that site is malicious, what should happen is you should get some kind of block page. So in this case, I have Umbrella, but it could be Fortinet, it could be whatever vendor. But if you don't see a block page, if you see a ghost or somebody that says this site was not blocked, what that means is anybody can create a website and start social engineering and phishing you and send crap emails and redirections. I can buy a fake domain and trick you to go there in the site. So if you don't have reputation security, you think reputation security. And OpenDNS is free for home use. So anybody can basically just YouTube, OpenDNS, free install, and watch a YouTube video, and this will walk you through how to do this. And it's free for home use. It only costs if you are using it for like corporate networks, but any at least home user should have this capability. The other thing I would say is filtering, but filtering is typically more around like blocking. If you're at home, you may want to block gambling or sites, but I would say reputation security is more important. Like content policy, reputation security is more security. So if you don't have that capability for your home network particular, please spend the time this afternoon and turn that on. It's free to do. File integrity, which is not antivirus. Antivirus scans into this pattern matching, hash matching. File integrity looks at the behavior of files. Like, why is this file trying to encrypt my hard drive? So we're talking more advanced endpoint security, and then the training stuff. So here's some things you can do. And you may have heard of some of this or thought of some of this, but I would definitely say spend the time, maybe tonight, an hour and a half, and do these 4 or 5 things. 1, log into your home router. Go to .1, find your IP address, most likely go to .1, log in your home router, see if there's any updates. I say this because your router could be potentially exposed to external parties, and if it's vulnerable, it can be exploited. Updates have patches. Patches fix vulnerabilities. And a lot of times people in their home network, they won't update their home router because they won't log into a home router. They just set it up. And then 5 years later, they're running the same software. So hopefully you've not done that. Log in your home router. Change the password. If the password's still admin, change that. Because then somebody could get. So otherwise, spend the minutes and do the hygiene. See the latest updates and change the login password. When I go visit my family members, this is what I do. I log into their home router. I log in as admin because they probably didn't change it, and I actually start making those changes. Go into all of your kids' computers and run the latest updates. You're probably secure, but is your family member, like my fiance loves to hit I'll ignore this update until later, and she'll do that to rapture if I don't make her do that. Update all the computers because right now everybody's a target. Install reputation security. And again, to give you an idea of what I mean, imagine a website being online that says they're a bank, but if it's been online for a couple hours, if it's hosted from GoDaddy, but they say they're a bank, if it's hosted from some other country, but they say they're US based, or it's in China, but they say, but the bank's really in the US, like it's supposed to be in China. All these little things as examples, wherever you're in the world, reduce the credit score. And that's why I'm saying this is a really effective way to reduce the risk of social engineering and any type of phishing attacks. By the way, too, if you get files and you're curious if the file is malicious or not, here's a free tool called Joe Sandbox. Joe Sandbox is an online sandbox, free as beer. And all you have to do is take a file, drag it and drop it in Joe Sandbox, wait a minute and a half, and it'll come back and say, yeah, that's malware or it's whatever it is. And it'll break down why, show you a video, etc. So again, like all of you now have basic file analysis capabilities. So kids are like, hey, I want to install this game, and you're not sure if it's malicious or not. Now you have to just use Joe Sandbox. And there's many other sources out there, paid or free. I'm going to try to give you at least some stuff. So at the very least, the OpenDNS and Joe Sandbox are both free tools, so it costs you nothing. And by changing your passwords and upware, all of that alone is going to dramatically reduce the risk of you're having your home network owned. Because the attackers want your home network because they realize that you're probably connected through VPN back to your corporate network. Now, looking at capabilities, this would be and here's what I'm saying would be a best reputation security I'm talking about, some kind of antivirus if you have it, but more important, malware. And then basically VPN when you connect back to your corporate network. So again, basic stuff that I just talked about, it's a layered defense in depth. You're not just saying, oh, it's just antivirus. And if somebody tricks you to install something that your antivirus isn't tuned for, you won't. By the way, reality check here. Antivirus heavily used signatures. Now, a concept a lot of people don't realize. If you think about on this call right now, I don't know how many are on there. Maybe there's thousands. Maybe there's 2 people. Who knows? I see. But let's assume there's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, whatever. All of you probably have jobs. All of your jobs have money. And hopefully you're all buying Cisco firewalls, but you're probably buying Fortinet, Palo Alto. You're buying all sorts of stuff. So let's pick a vendor, whatever vendor it is. We'll call it vendor XYZ. If I'm going to sell my antivirus or IPS, that signature matching, to you, I'm also going to sell it to Walmart. I'm going to sell it to Sam's Car Lot. I'm going to sell it to the Army. I'm going to sell it to the government. I'm going to sell it to the churches. I'm going to sell it to whoever will buy my product. And all of you have different networks, different endpoints, different vulnerabilities. So how in the hell could I ever give you a product that knows your vulnerabilities and defends your network, especially your home network. That your home network is not my target audience. My target audience is big commercial. The answer to that question is I can't. It's impossible. So what happens is vendors will pick the top 30,000 or 40,000 or so bad stuff and give you this list. So when you say it's up to date, you're getting the latest update every hour from that vendor, you're getting updates that apply to all these different people, which means half of that stuff, if not more, means nothing to you. Nothing. So your home network has all sorts of stuff that potentially is not being defended, yet you're defending other people's threats. You're defending Walmart's threats, et cetera, because you're getting that blanket update. So I would say in general, the antivirus and IPS that you have, let's say at your home network, if you even have that, maybe 50% or more of the stuff you're checking for means nothing. It's not on your network. You're defending nothing, yet you're looking and you're scanning your traffic for that. And I would say probably for your home network, 25, 30%, if not more, of your actual real vulnerabilities are likely not being defended by those tools because you haven't tuned those tools, because nobody's tuning their home stuff. Yeah, in the corporate world, people contract people like myself to come out and tune their IPS and antivirus. But who the hell is contracting somebody to tune their home network? Nobody is. They're just setting and forgetting. That means a lot of the vulnerabilities on your home network, as an example, even with an antivirus or IPS, are not being defended if it's not a general vulnerability. But something unique and specific, unless you tune your tool, that tool is not going to defend you. So that's a reality check of how these tools work. And this is why things like threat intelligence and vulnerability data, which I'm showing here, are becoming more and more important in this world, because what this does is this says, here are my actual vulnerabilities. Security tool, tune this, like adjust to my vulnerabilities. And vendors like Cisco, as an example, using Firepower is one example, but we're not the only ones doing this. But you're finding that as a trend, vendors are starting to pull vulnerability data with integrations and then adjusting those signatures. So then you actually say, oh, this stuff really exists on my network. Here's what I should actually be defending. So this is going to, I would say 5-10 years from now, even home devices, all this will have that integration. Right now, it's pretty common in the corporate world, not so common on the home world, but it's going to bleed out there because it's that important. If you don't have that, you have half-ass security because you're not tuning these products. The same applies to threat intelligence, which there's tactical threat intelligence. That's what probably all of you are thinking about. So if I say threat intelligence, you're saying, oh, feed me this blacklist of bad stuff. Give me the 10,000 worst IP addresses. But that threat intelligence is not that effective. That's really short-lived threat intelligence. Like this, the lifetime for that is within minutes, maybe. So the real threat intelligence is the stuff on Facebook and the stuff on Twitter. It's the actionable threat intelligence. So instead of technical, it's the tactical threat intelligence, the change of landscape. Oh, social engineering attacks are happening right now, and here's the tactic and tool being used. That's different from getting a blacklist of devices. And I would say the future is also leveraging more and more of scrapers and data on the internet and adjusting security tools based on that intelligence. So if you want a preview of the future, it's going to be not technical, but tactical threat intelligence and vulnerability data integrations. Unfortunately, these capabilities are only now happening in the corporate network. They're not happening in the home network. So I show this because it's going to be 5+ years before you really see these capabilities hit home. So until then, it's up to you to do what I'm talking about and make these adjustments. If you're just going to wait for the vendor to save you, unfortunately, it's going to be 5 or 10 years before the home network has that capability. It's just the reality we live in. And this is an example of like a corporate network with all the capabilities people typically would want for defending against any sort of exploit. And as you can see, it's much more rich. And a lot of the customers I talk to have some form of these capabilities, and they also have some of the integrations. But for the home network, much, much less secure. Now, process to me means automation, meaning if you were to ask me, what can you do about the home network? How do you stop social engineering? You can't stop it, but to reduce the impact, it's about reducing your exposure. So my kids don't have admin access. Well, my child, my 10-year-old, my 8-month-old doesn't have a computer, doesn't even know how to talk yet. But reducing admin access would make sense. Forcing VPN makes sense. If you want to test VPN, check out the Wi-Fi Pineapple or any of the Wi-Fi exploitation tools, and you'll see why you need basically VPN, which basically means encrypting the traffic so a man-in-the-middle attack doesn't happen. I would say as well, automating updates. And then again, that reputation security I keep hitting home is an automated way to stop somebody from tricking you to go into the wrong site. So even if you fall for the social engineering attack, the attack will be prevented when you try to go to the link. So these are your process type stuff. And then there's the training and the people. Now, for me, it's about conversation that's real world. So at times I have to go to customer sites and teach them and do seminars on this concept of training. And I always not recommend the corporate boring language because nobody reads that. In the end, you can post all the corporate boring language you want. In the end, if they want to do something, they're going to do it. We had a situation at Cisco, and Omar may actually remember this one, where back in the day during the World Cups, football or soccer, we had our South American people that wanted to watch the World Cup. So they were installing basically DNS changing software because the idea is in South America, they couldn't watch it for free. You had to be in a different country. So all you have to do is use a DNS changing solution, and then it looks like you're in another country. So they're downloading tools like OAVPN and these other tools that are wrapped with backdoors, which basically causes the internal network to be compromised. So in the end, the way to prevent this is not to prevent them from installing that software because they'll just install something else. They'll keep installing it because they want to watch it. They're passionate about their soccer or football. So the way to do it is to allow them to watch it and stream it internally. So basically they stop doing that. So you need to understand human characteristics. You can't just say, don't do this, because people a lot of times don't care, and it's about priority, and operations will out prioritize security 10 times out of 10. So with that in mind, to start small, home networks, I have a conversation with my kids, and I'll say the picture of the old guy there playing the video game. I'll try to teach them about social engineering and say, hey, in a video game, if somebody says they want some information about you and they say they're a kid or somebody helping you out, imagine if it's some old creepy guy asking you for that information. And naturally, as a 10-year-old girl, the reaction is, ew, which is fine because later she was playing a game and said, hey, look, see these people? Imagine they're all old people. Imagine that I'm in a retirement home and they're all trying to play this game. And she found it funny, but it's causing her to think correctly, which is you can't just trust people for who they are. And I'll show you an example of a social engineering attack my buddy and I did for the RSA conference, which we did a full pen test using that exact same strategy. And it works, and it still works. So that's my recommendation. Same conversation. I was talking to my father-in-law, and I was talking about getting phone calls, and I was like, yeah, there's one that's happening right now. This is about 8 months to a year ago, where we're seeing a ton of these phone call attacks where they would look at your social media and identify when you have grandchildren and an adult. So usually somebody 60 plus years and somebody that's 16 or younger. And the attack is you call somebody and you say, hey, your grandson has been arrested for smoking marijuana. They ask not to have their parents called, instead call you, the grandparents, and they don't want their parents to know. You know, I'm the police officer, the bail is this. If you pay the bail, we won't tell the parents. Complete scam, but if somebody's in their 70s or 80s, they're going to say, oh, you know, poor Joey who's 16, poor grandson, and they'll pay that bail. So my stepfather got that phone call at one point and questioned it, of course, because Theo, the person that was involved, is only like 7 or 8 years old, so it doesn't make any sense. But the attacker didn't do the research. But if the kid was 13 or 14, that would have been a different story. And the education to them and to you is to learn to question. So what I will tell him is, in the future, if somebody ever calls you, like the tax thing I talked about or this other one, teach them to say, why are they pushing me to do something right now? In general, the phishing tactics are do something right now. It's always urgent. Like they're trying to get you to do something. So, hey, I'm with IT support. I need you to install this update right now. Or, hey, I'm with the IRS. You need to pay this right now. Or your grandson or granddaughter is in jail. Pay this right now. It's always an urgent tactic. So that's one thing. Also, by the way, the last slide shows, also look at the actual link. So if you get a link, you can hover over the link. Or if you have a tool like Cisco Umbrella or something, you can drop it. Or Joe Sandbox even has this, where you can take the link and drop it in Joe's Sandbox, and they'll evaluate it via reputation security. So Joe Sandbox also has that along with the file identification piece, free to use. So and there's many of these Cisco Talos. There's a lot of different vendors that have locations where you can go to a site and drop a link, and they'll evaluate the link for you. So you can use that as well. But this is an example of just by eyeball somebody buying a site or using a different site. But train to question the sites when we look at it, and then train the question, why is there urgent code? Also, by the way, QR codes, tiny URLs, all that stuff, you have to question because you don't know where it's going to send you. Like if I put a tiny URL up on the screen, you don't know what's going to send you. That can send you to someplace malicious. So just learning the question is really the training when it comes to people. As long as you question and you take that hesitated, like, wait, could this actually be happening? That's good enough. Most people who get owned don't know how to question, and they just immediately agree. And this is an example, again, of different phishing emails and all that. But the question is to look at this and say, is this real or not? As long as you learn to question things, these things won't necessarily be as effective against you. Now, to give you an example of taking this to the next level, here's an example of a tactical social engineering attack that was done for a penetration test. Now, this was like inspired, so I have to give my hat tip to the Robin Sage concept, where when Robin Sage, if you haven't heard of that, they took a stripper and gave her an IT background and started to abstract sensitive data from the military. And my buddy and I thought it was pretty awesome, but we're like, we have to do this pen test with this customer. What if we did a tactical version of the Robin Sage? Hence, and the invention of Emily Williams. And the idea was we took a girl that works at a restaurant, can't name the restaurant because I don't know if this is recorded, but the restaurant, they sell chicken wings. They have owls on the t-shirt. They wear like short orange shorts. And she was like, yeah, you can have a picture. Like she was a friend of somebody. So she gave us some pictures of herself. We're like, we're going to create for you a whole different alias, a whole identity that's not you. And we're going to call this identity Emily Williams. She thought that was pretty awesome. So we created Emily Williams, and within hours, people were endorsing her skill sets. If you actually looked at her background, technically, she would have been like 10 years old when she started in the IT world, but nobody really counts because she's an attractive girl. And basically use this as a way to become friends on social media to our target. So we only were friending people that worked at this company. Now, to give you an example of using social engineering and tricking somebody, this is where I wanted to get access to the person in charge of desktops and the laptops. So when I friended this person, they had a pop-up come up and say, hey, do I know you? So they questioned me, which is good. Again, they're trained to question, why is some person that I've never heard of trying to be my friend? So to counter this, what I did was I clicked their social media Facebook profile and saw their work history and saw 10 years ago that they worked at Hungry Howie's Pizza. So I said, you don't remember me from the Hungry Howie's days. Then I clicked Hungry Howie's Pizza and saw there's other people that was friends with this person that also worked at Hungry Howie's, and saw that one person was named Derek. So I said, I was Derek's girlfriend. Then I clicked Derek's Facebook page and saw that his current location at the time was New York City. So then I made up a story really quick and said, yeah, I was Derek's girlfriend. You don't remember me from 10 years ago? Assuming that nobody would remember somebody's girlfriend from 10 years ago. And then said, hey, I was in New York City and I was catching up with Derek. And I mentioned that I'm starting at your company in like 2 weeks. I just left my company and I have 2 weeks. I get my 2-week notice, but I'll be starting in 2 weeks. And he's like, holy crap, did you know that this other person, the one I'm targeting, works at that company? And this person became a good friend of mine and allowed me to get access to certain things within the company. Now that's fine, it's great, but the idea is we also wanted to launch more sophisticated attacks. So what we did was, once we had all of our friends on Facebook, we used a tool called Beef, or the Browser Injection Framework, and posted Christmas cards at around Christmas time. And if you click the Christmas card, you would see the Christmas card, but you would also, we're doing browser injection. So all of you have browsers, and unless you're keeping your browsers up to date, which a lot of people don't, your browsers will have vulnerabilities. So your browser's vulnerabilities are the doorway to allow me to do different things like capture screen captures, make weird sounds, download your hash to brute force your password and all sorts of fun stuff. By the way, Beef hooks your browser. So when you go offline and you come back online, we can then continue the attack when you come back online. So it's an interesting tool. I would say the browser injection framework, Beef, or the social engineering toolkit set are two really effective tools that are free to use that you can go use Google to learn more about to launch these types of attacks if you want to basically launch a social engineering attacks against your family, friends, or corporation. The end result of this was we were able to get VPN passwords to bypass all the perimeter security. We logged in their call managers, changed their phone numbers, put Emily Williams as a new hire. And in the end, in February on their sales kickoff, Emily Williams was part of the new hire list. She had a phone number. She was basically had an email address through basically our penetration test. So again, this social engineering stuff can be really tactical and really specific if you want it to be, or it can be very generic. And my point here is to show the different extremes to make sure that you continuously be aware of this threat, because it's not as simple as, oh, I just look for emails that come from Nigeria saying I want $1 million and I'm trained, I'm good to go. It's a lot more sophisticated than that. Know the current story, not the technology, because the technology has been around forever. The tactics is what's constantly changing. So I'll end with this. Security is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't become secure. That's not how it works. So just because you've heard of social engineering doesn't mean you've become trained and you've gotten to your destination of preparing yourself for social engineering. No, you haven't. It's a journey. You have to keep understanding the stories, the changes, what's happening right now with the COVID-19 and the current stories and current tactics where, as I mentioned, there's a lot of these fake health maps that are wrapped with backdoors, and they're using social engineering to get you to install that health map to find the current or the local place testing for COVID, but really it's an attacker putting a backdoor in your computer, as I showed real examples of doing that. Or it's trying to get information about you, or it's getting a phone call to tell you about your voting that's coming up in the USA, or COVID-19 information, but that phone call is also going to ask you to do something. It's going to say, by the way, we need you to do this right now. Donate this money or do this or do that. And that's the attack. The attack is the making you do something right now. And that's hopefully where I'm reopening your eyes to this threat, because this threat is happening right now. This is a real thing that you need to be concerned of. What I'll do now is I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll go to, I guess, any Q&A we have. Omar, are we using the Discord channel for the Q&A, or are you still there, Omar? What are we doing for Q&A?
Yeah, you can actually, so everybody will ask you questions in the Discord channel. So if you're already done with the presentation, we will go on a break. And once again, thank you so much for your time and supporting the DEF CON Red Team Village, as well as the Texas Cyber Summit in this event. And for all the attendees, feel free to join the conversation at our Discord servers. You will find the links at the event website, which is in the bottom of the screen. And we will go in a brief break, and basically, Joy, if you want, join us in the conversation there. And thank you again.
Sure. Yeah. So everybody, I'm gonna hang out the Discord for at least to my time, to the end of the top of the hours, the next 12, 15 minutes. If you have questions on all this, if you want access to tools, etc., let me know. If you want to learn more, I have an attack and defend lab. So to get you to go to the Discord site, if you go to the Discord site and say, I want to learn more about the lab, I will give you information there on how to learn more about hands-on labs and stuff. So I want you to be involved. So go find the Discord channel, ask those questions. I'll be there live with Omar and others. And stay safe, continue your education. And I appreciate all of you for your time.